MMA is the newer sport, and thus fighters getting called the greatest of all time is kind of changing constantly. Oliveira is one of the newer ones, being considered the GOAT at least in his division. So let's take a look at guys who have been considered, and in many cases are still considered contenders for the GOAT losing their fight. Let's get started, but first make sure to give this video a like, as the algorithm is a real like slut. After Amanda Nunes defeated Ronda Rousey, the previous UFC Women's GOAT, she started moving up in the conversation as being the best of all time. But as soon as she beat the other GOAT, Chris Cyborg, there was no doubt that she was the female GOAT. She went on a 12-fight winning streak, beating those two women and also other top fighters like Miocic Tate, Valentina Shevchenko twice, and Holly Holm. But the day came when somebody finally figured her out, or maybe caught her on an off day, and that was just recently, last year in her last fight, when Juliana Penn just took her apart. They had an amazing fight, with both exchanging brutal hits, but as opposed to her other opponents, Penn was able to walk through Nunes' best shots. Penn also landed some crazy hits until she was finally able to submit her. Nunes is still the GOAT, but her active reign might be over. Max Holloway is one of my favorite fighters. His style is just fun and entertaining, and he reigned as the featherweight GOAT since basically 2017, after absolutely taking the previous GOAT, Jose Aldo, apart back to back. He won on a 13-fight winning streak, beating amazing opponents like Aldo, Perez, Lamas, Oliveira, and Ortega before moving up to challenge Poirier, where he barely lost by a decision. His GOAT status has been taken away by the fast-growing Alexander Volkanovski, who has beat Holloway 3 times.
Just didn't have a lot on it. His left eyebrow, but other than that.
2 of those fights were very competitive, but the last one was kind of sad watching the great Holloway just be destroyed. Holloway is still up there in the conversation, but now it's for the number 2 spot of all time. Stipe Miocic is still considered the GOAT in the heavyweight division in the UFC, but that could be changing soon. After getting the belt from Fabricio Werdum in 2016, he defended the belt 3 times before losing to Daniel Cormier. Although they had a trilogy and Miocic ended up winning 2 of those fights, he still holds the record for the most defenses in the heavyweight division at only 3, which shows how hard the division can be to conquer. He hasn't fought in over a year after losing to the freaking beast that is Francis Ngannou.
These big openings.
Ngannou, if he stays in the UFC, could very well be the next GOAT. His power is just insane. But for now, Miocic is still safely considered the heavyweight GOAT of the UFC. So now we have a controversial one in Conor McGregor. Is he considered the GOAT by anybody? Well, I'm not sure, but he does appear on some lists. But the person who I think considers him the GOAT the most is himself. McGregor was the first fighter to hold 2 championship belts simultaneously in the UFC, and he has actually won fights in 3 divisions, which is very impressive. Besides losing to Nate Diaz, he also lost to Khabib, but the last 2 fights are the ones that I think have really hurt his chances of being the GOAT, after losing 2 straight times to Dustin Poirier. Besides, he has never defended a single one of his championship belts throughout his entire career. That's what really hurts his standing. BJ Penn was once considered the lightweight GOAT, not just in the UFC, but throughout all of MMA. This man could move up and down the weight classes at the drop of a hat, fighting at lightweight and even having a light heavyweight fight against Renzo Gracie. He has many losses, but not many at lightweight. He won the belt in 2008 and defended it 3 times. Besides losing fights in other divisions against Machida, GSP twice, and Matt Hughes, at lightweight, his fall came when he fought against Frankie Edgar.
The pressure on BJ Penn right now, landing shot after shot. And if BJ Penn doesn't work, Herb Dean is going to stop.
Sadly, after those 2 losses, his career took a nosedive, winning just 1 fight out of his last 11. His status as the all-time GOAT at lightweight has been taken away long ago, but for a time, he was considered the GOAT in that division. Chuck Liddell was considered the UFC light heavyweight GOAT for a couple of years in the early 2000s after beating Tito Ortiz twice by knockout, Randy Couture twice by knockout, and even Alistair Overeem by knockout. He was a terrifying man in that division and seemed like he had hands of steel. During his reign as the GOAT, He knocked out every single fighter he faced. 7 straight knockout victories is just incredible. His stay as GOAT of course ended when Jon Jones took over, but his loss to Quinton Rampage Jackson at UFC 71 was absolutely brutal. He got knocked out in only the first round, and this started the downfall of his career, losing 6 out of his last 7 fights. His punch strength is probably still the GOAT in that division though. Demetrious Mighty Mouse Johnson is still considered the GOAT in the flyweight division. This man had won the title in 2012 against Joseph Benavidez and didn't lose it until 2018, meaning he had 11 successful title defenses, beating great opponents like Kyoji Horiguchi, John Dodson twice, and Henry Cejudo. Unfortunately, this last man was the one that eventually came around and defeated the GOAT, ending his reign as a champion and his time in the UFC.
Nice counter. Oh, nice throw by The
fight was really close, and nobody would have been angry if the fight had gone the other way. He moved over to one championship and won the title at flyweight there also, before losing his last fight against Adriano Moraes. His GOAT status is cemented, unless Cejudo comes back and decides to fight a ton more in that division. Royce Gracie is considered the first GOAT in MMA. He basically made the UFC with his dominant jiu-jitsu, running through his opponents for 12 straight fights. Now, no one will consider Royce the all-time GOAT, or GOAT at any division, but he's like Babe Ruth. He was the first GOAT when the competition was subpar, and also at the beginning of the sport. He's now considered the top pioneer of MMA. His demise eventually came with none other than the Gracie killer, Kazushi Sakuraba.
Yeah. But Royce is just taking a beating now. He's taking a beating.
Early on, Sakuraba was the only fighter that could beat the Gracies. He beat 4 different Gracies before Royce himself beat him later on in 2007. Royce will always be remembered as one of the early fighters that made MMA what it is today, an amazing sport. Now we have Triple C, Henry Cejudo, who some people might consider the GOAT because he won 2 belts in 2 divisions, which is pretty hard to do. And he beat great competition to get there. He beat a GOAT contender in Dominic Cruz and Demetrious Johnson, but also beat Sergio Pettis and cheater TJ Dillashaw, beating 2 of those in dominant fashion. His loss was way before he was considered a contender for the GOAT moniker, but we have to finish the list somehow. His loss came against the undisputed flyweight GOAT in Demetrious Johnson, and it was by knockout.
Big trouble early. Great Muay Thai to the body. Trying to finish it.
Cejudo will probably never be considered the GOAT in a specific division since he has not fought long enough in any single one. But if he comes back and actually gets the 4th C in his name, maybe he will have to be considered in talks as the all-time great of MMA. Sorry guys, but I have to round out the list with another fighter who lost when he was possibly still not considered the GOAT. Georges St Pierre is without a doubt the GOAT in the welterweight division, but he was so dominant for so long that he is pretty high as the overall GOAT, and some lists have him as the number 1. St Pierre defended the belt a total of 9 times, and even won the middleweight belt after coming back 4 years after initially retiring. This man is a beast of an athlete, and he is in the talks as the best because he not only beat his opponents, he dominated almost all of them, barely losing any rounds. The crazy thing is that he changed his fighting style midway through his career and still dominated. His defining loss came against Matt Serra. This was probably a fluke loss, and he quickly came back and beat Serra by TKO, and also avenged his other loss to Matt Hughes, beating him twice. His record is almost unblemished, and that's why he's in the top 3 of contenders for the all-time MMA GOAT. I don't think that these losses have affected these guys' greatness at all, since most fighters still have a loss on their record. You have guys like Khabib, who has never lost, but is still not considered the undisputed GOAT by most fans. Thanks for watching this video. I'll see you next time.